You're tuned into 91.9 KCSB-FM in Santa Barbara. Coming up next is a selection of the book When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by co-authors Patrice Cullors and Asha Bondale, as part of UCSB Reads 2021 in partnership with the UCSB Library. Readings take place weekly on Thursdays at 91.9 FM on your dial or kcsb.org online from 5:30 to 6 p.m. Thanks for tuning in to KCSB-FM, a community partner of UCSB Reads.
For those who might be offended by frank language, today's excerpts from When They Call You a Terrorist include racially charged terms that bring home important themes of the book. Listener discretion is advised.
My name is Jamie Bender, but I go by the name Lady J. My role at KCSB is as DJ and host of the radio show called Pon Rome, which is a reggae music program. Professionally, I work for the County of Los Angeles, providing inner-city youth with services like mental health, educational services, and community-based services. For example, gang intervention and prevention with the GRYD Program or the Arts for Incarcerated Youth Network Program. Today, I'll be reading from the book When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Cullors and Asha Bondale. We're at Chapter 7, entitled All the Bones We Could Find. We're starting partway through page 101 of the print edition and on page 137 of the gloss edition. Dad, I think you should move here, I say. You seem so happy in this place, so at peace, I say. Too slow for me here, he argues back and praises LA, the city for him that made freedom an ever-moving target. After a week, we say goodbye to Eunice, to my grandfather Carl, to porches and slow walks and ongoing spaces of Black people who just love you and openly. Together, we head back to LA, and I spend much of the summer watching my father play baseball with his brothers, the game he loves surrounded by people he loves. By now, I am fully in love with Mark Anthony, who is patient and kind and deeply consistent. He is not insecure about my previous relationships, in particular ones I've had with women. He does not judge my sexuality. He loves me as is, which is a gift I wish for all of us to receive. The gift of being loved simply because of who you are, not in spite of it, not with condition, not loved in parts. Mark Anthony is a man who has literally dedicated himself to healing. While I am in religious studies at UCLA, he is doing his master's in Chinese medicine. A friend's mother has a tiny cottage in Topanga Canyon that's surrounded by trees. We decided to move in together. The area is more breathtakingly beautiful than I've ever lived up to the point, and I accept finally that this is my life. This is my blessed life as the winter holidays roll in. I tell my father we will celebrate them fully. All those moments we missed together, we will make up for them this year. On Thanksgiving, my grandma Vina will make gumbo with such love that I am filled until Christmas. On December 25th, 2009, my grandma's house is in full party mode. This is my father's first Christmas back home in half a decade. All the family shows up, and before the night comes to a close, between all of us who are gathered, I am certain we say I love you 1,000 times. We kiss each other until we spill over in giggles and laugh until we ache. We leave my grandma's home, having wrapped ourselves in ourselves and snuggled down in it. We thank all of the universe for the grace shown our family. We say goodnight to one another, and we say it very deliberately because on this Christmas in 2009, we give those words such deliberate meaning. On December 26th, I don't speak to my father, which is why I call him early on December 27th. I don't reach him, but I leave a message, and he calls me back, a call that I miss. He leaves me a voicemail in which he says he doesn't feel well, a message I do not get immediately. I'm at my mother's house visiting. She had a fight with my sister Jasmine and Mark Anthony, and I have come to help patch things up. We talk, we help settle things, and after not so long, we head back up to the canyon, driving that long stretch of road in which cell service drops out. When we pull up to our small home, I hear our landline ringing, and now voicemail alerts are coming through on my cell. I answer the landline. Are you sitting down? It's my mother, and her voice is in a panic. I tell her I'm not, and I ask her what's wrong, but she cannot stop asking me if I am sitting down. She asks me 4 times, 5 times, and now I've spun into a panic. My mind goes immediately, for some reason, to my nephew Chase, Monty's now near teenage son. Where's Chase? What's wrong? What's going on? I yell. Mom, what is it? Which is when she says, they think your father is dead, she says. That's what they're saying. When you are told that your father is dead, you really can't believe it's true. You can't just accept it, and I didn't. What proof was there? My mother has heard the news from a cousin who heard it from another man who lived in the shelter that my father lived in. But no one in my family has heard from the shelter itself. I take this as a hopeful sign. I am questioning my mother as I am corralling Mark Anthony to head back down the mountain, out to find my father. I have always been able to find my father. We get into the car, and Mark Anthony will recall for me later that I went into shock. I am unable to speak. He will tell me later of guiding me to the car and into the passenger seat so we could begin the 30-minute ride back down the canyon. I remember clutching my phone. I don't remember why. We cannot get service for the entirety of the ride. When we finally do, I call my father's cell. I call it and I call it, trying to will him to answer. Mark Anthony tells me later I was still doing this as we pulled up to the shelter, even as the street filled with police cars and a van from the coroner's office. I get out of the car and approach the first officer I see. I'm Gabriel Brignat's daughter. I say this matter-of-factly, and equally as matter-of-factly, the officer says to me, your father is dead. I'm sorry. The officer tells me I cannot go upstairs to see my father's body until the medical examiner has determined whether or not there was foul play. I sit outside the shelter, unable to move, and then, one by one, my friends who Mark Anthony has called begin to arrive and surround me. The medical examiner emerges, declares my father's death was not foul play. I am allowed upstairs, this final moment, with the man who helped give me life. My father is on a stretcher in front of the room he shared with 3 other men. He is wearing white boxers and a white t-shirt. He still has on his glasses and his watch. I remove them. I keep them. I go to his room and look around this tiny space that once was and now no longer is his. This place where he was reinventing himself. I began packing up the few material items that proved he was there. My father was here. He existed. Gabriel Brignat. This single lockbox of important papers. These few pairs of shoes and items of clothing. They are not the sum of a man, but they are part of him. I pack them up. This is the business of death. I lean over my father's body. I kiss him one final time. I tell him I love him. There is nothing more I can do here. I turn away slowly, and just as slowly, I leave. I want my father to have the dignity in death that he was never afforded in life. I search for a funeral home and a florist. I call everyone in his address book and tell them, we are planning the service. The work helps blunt the pain for a time. I select the casket because it is powder blue and my father loved blue. My grandmother selects a suit for him to wear in death that is nicer than any item of clothing my father owned in his life. At the turn of a new year, on January 3rd, 2010, 300 of us gathered to honor the life of Gabriel Brignat. My friend sings Amazing Grace. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. I believed in my father. I believed in Gabriel Brignett. I believed in us. I still believe in us. My father's sponsor rises and assumes the position before the microphone and begins to speak. He tells the room about a man desperate to be a better version of himself. He tells the room of a man who was gentle. He tells the room of a man who worked as hard as any man he knew. He tells the room that my father was just coming up on steps 8 and 9 in the program. He was making a list of the people he had harmed and then finding ways to make amends to each one. In that room, on that day, we give my father the steps 8 and 9. We choose forgiveness and love as a collective act. When it is my turn to stand and face this group of people I have gathered, the first time I have ever called community together to acknowledge a life, I am overwhelmed by the responsibility to offer a eulogy that is as authentic as Gabriel Brignett was. I stand and speak of a man who was more brilliant than he knew or was ever given credit for. I tell them about a man who was a full burst of love. I speak about a man who was flawed and flawless, as each one of us is. I speak about a man I am proud to call my father. A week after the service, we drive out to the cemetery in Riverside, California. We are going to bury my father with complete military honors. There are 6 of us gathered at this final resting place, including my grandmother and my Aunt Jackie, who works at the Pentagon. Aunt Jackie is dressed in full uniform and represents her brother with a deep swell of pride. And her brother, a forgotten veteran of wars he never knew had been declared on his one thin brown body that in the end would succumb to a heart that was broken. My father, at 50 years old, officially died of a heart attack. We sit before his casket as taps begins to play and a soldier presents me with the folded American flag that had covered his coffin. I take it and I hold it. This flag for a nation in which my father, my black father, my good and imperfect and loving black father could not be possible. My father who got cages instead of compassion. My father whose whole story no one of us will ever know. What did it to him, all those years locked away, all that time in chains, all those days upon days without human touch, except touch meant to harm. Hands behind your back, nigger. Get on the effing wall, nigger. Lift your sack, nigger. Don't look at me like that or I will effing kill your black ass. It would be easy to speculate about the impact of years of cocaine use on my father's heart. But I suspect that it will tell us less than if we could measure the cumulative effects of hatred, racism, and indignity. What is the impact of years of strip searches, of being bent over, the years before that when you were a child and knew that no dream you had for yourself was taken seriously by anyone, that you were not someone who would be fully invested in by a nation that treated you as expendable? What is the impact of not being valued? How do you measure the loss of what a human being does not receive? My father was part of a generation of black men who spent a lifetime watching hope and dreams shoved just out of their reach until it seemed normal, the way it just was. I lost my father at a time when 2.2 million people had gone missing on our watch, buried in prisons that were buried in small towns. But somehow, and unbelievably, this man kept coming back. He kept coming back. He kept coming back. And he kept trying. My father kept effing trying. This man, my father, Gabriel Brignett, who loved me deeply and fiercely, who spent every moment with me telling me how black life mattered. This was my father, the bones and the blood and the soul of him. This was Gabriel Brignett, and I hold that flag that had covered his casket. This man who died of a broken heart in this nation of broken promises. And I think that if my father could not be possible in this America, then how is it that such a thing as America could ever be possible? Part 2, Black Lives Matter. Chapter 8, Zero Dark 30, the remix. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Lucille Clifton. My phone jolts me out of a deeply needed sleep just past midnight. It is my mother's voice I hear on the other end of the line. Tris, it's your brother. She says, it's Monty. He's been arrested. I sit up immediately, try to shake the sleep off my body, my brain. My exhaustion is encompassing and thick. It is 2006 and I am in college full-time now, studying philosophy with a concentration in the Abrahamic traditions. But I am also working full-time with Mark Anthony and our friend Jason, executing a special program at my old high school, Cleveland, on trauma and resilience. It takes me a minute, only just a month before they had taken my father, Gabriel, to the fire camp prison. How do I make sense of what my mother is saying? How do I make sense of a world that seems hell-bent on subverting it? Monty had come home from his first prison bid in 2003, and as we learned quickly, frighteningly, there was no infrastructure that existed to help secure either his re-entry or his mental health. Whatever was going to happen would happen because of us, the family, and our capacity to manage severe mental illness. We learned quickly that intervention was either us alone and without medical professional support, or it was the police. The brutal memory of Monty's first break, during which we learned that there were no social services or safety nets for my brother, hung over all of our heads like a sword. We lived alongside the steady buzz of anxiety. I turned ever more toward spirit, toward that which I could not see but could feel at all times in order to manage my emotions. This is to say I prayed often and surrounded myself ever more closely with the family I created. Mark Anthony and Tanya, a close friend from high school. Jason from work. New friends from the strategy center. They sustained me. When Monty came home, after we were able to get him stable after weeks in the hospital, he wanted nothing more than to be a self-sufficient man in the world. But the cycling in and out of juvie during his childhood for drinking or tagging or just standing on the street with his boys, and then, of course, the time in prison, meant he had never had a single job in his life, save for any forced labor that he was locked up. We helped him get a low-wage, low-level job at a local Rite Aid. Carla and I had both done our time at Rite Aids in LA, and I still remember his excitement at the end of the first day. Tris, I got this. He was so deeply proud. But a week into his very first paid position, he was promptly fired. His background check had come back. No ex-felons. Dude, get the hell out of here. We tried pulling him closer to us, and my mother begged him to live with her, risking her Section 8 status. If you have government housing benefits, you cannot have anyone living with you if they've been convicted of a crime, even if they are a juvenile, and even if they are incapable of caring for themselves because of an illness, and even if they cannot get a job because even the most low-level jobs won't hire someone with a conviction. In California, there are more than 4,800 barriers to re-entry, from jobs, housing and food bans, to school, financial aid bans, and the list goes on. You can have a 2-year sentence, but it doesn't mean you're not doing life. In any case, Monty didn't want to put my mother at risk and decided instead, and against our wishes, to move back with Cynthia, the mother of his son Chase. But Cynthia had her own set of challenges in managing life since she had been shot all those years ago and left paralyzed. Some were physical and some were emotional, and all were present. My mother, in fact, stepped in to be Chase's caretaker because of his mother's overwhelm and my brother's own struggles. But disabled and poor and never having had treatment for the PTSD Born of having her life nearly taken at only 18 years old, Cynthia was in no position to manage Monty and ensure he took his medication or get him to County USC Hospital to see a doctor who could check to see that his levels were maintained. And like many people who struggle with schizoaffective disorder, a diagnosis that includes bipolar disorder, Monty eventually began to feel he was fine. He was better. In fact, without the medications. We didn't know this at first, but when we began to see signs of erratic behavior, his mood was exaggerated, too excited. He was speaking too fast. My mother, Paul, and I pushed him to come with us to a doctor. Monty, you need medical support. I tried to convince my brother. All of us do. But my brother's primary engagement with doctors had been in prison, a sure way to destabilize, if not completely destroy their relationship to healing. Even later, after he was home and we got him into County USC, medical staff treated him, a poor black man from a poor black family, a man with a conviction, not as a person whose critical condition could put him at the top of their list. They were perfunctory, in part because of their overwhelm, I'm sure. They did not remember his name or ours. There was no time for bedside pleasantries and reassurances. Get him in, get him stabilized, and get him the F out. Somebody else needs this bed. For my brother, hospitals signaled harm, if not outright hatred. Monty knew they didn't care for him and were not even particularly invested in seeing him well, only contained, controlled. But in these pre-dawn hours in the spring of 2006, my mother tells me she doesn't know the details, that she got a call from Monty, but he was neither clear nor calm. We cannot do anything to help Monty until later in the morning. I tell my mother that we'll head to Twin Towers, the LA County Jail, that I assume is holding my brother, first thing in the morning. Monty is not at Twin Towers, my mother informs me. Whatever happened, she says, Monty's in the hospital. We have to go see him there. There's a fear that grips you, a vice, a Geralt. When you are entering a place that is unknown, unknowable, and yes, in these times, there can be bursts of relief. Perhaps the ending will be one that is an alternative to the terrible ones you cannot help but imagine. But I know no such feeling now in our own Zero Dark 30, in our family's own treacherous theater of war, which in this moment has anchored itself against my brother, a man trying to live in a world that refuses a relationship with him that is not rooted in pain. When Paul, my mother, and I head to the hospital, our sister Jasmine does not join us. Seeing Monty in the condition we fear he will be in is too much for her to bear. I approach the hospital in the full expanse of prayer, a calling to every god and goddess I have ever heard or known.
That was a selection from When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrisse Cullors and Asha Bondale, the 2021 choice for the UCSB Reads program, which is designed to encourage reading and conversation in our community through a common book. Readings take place weekly on Thursdays at 91.9 FM or KCSB.org from 5:30 to 6 p.m. A list of virtual UCSB Reads events can be found on the UCSB Library website at www.library.ucsb.edu/UCSB Reads 2021. These will culminate in an online lecture with Patrisse Cullors on Wednesday, May 12th. Thanks for tuning in to 91.9 KCSB-FM in Santa Barbara, a community partner of UCSB Reads.
I want my rhythm. My rhythm.
I want my rhythm. to be alone. To be one with my black is fire. 'Cause we deserve to go home. And our souls will never be owned again. We can drive on our own. And rid ourselves of these new words. Rid ourselves of these new words. Rid ourselves of these new words. Can you stand on your own? Can you work me this song life? I can't wait to be alone. To be one with my black is fire. 'Cause we deserve to go home. And our souls will never be owned again. We can drive on our own. And rid ourselves of these new words. Rid ourselves of these new words. Rid ourselves of these new words. Can you stand on your own? Can you work me this song life? I can't wait to be alone. To be one with my black is fire. 'Cause we deserve to go home. And our souls will never be owned again. We can thrive on our own. And rid ourselves of these new words. Rid ourselves of these new words. Uh-huh.
This is KCSB-FM in Santa Barbara and studio transmitter link KKT91. KCSB-FM is owned and operated by the Associated Students of the University of California at Santa Barbara. Licensee is the Regents of the University of California with offices in Berkeley. KCSB-FM operates on an assigned center frequency of 91.9 megahertz with an effective radiated power of 620 watts by authority of the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C. Our studios and offices are located in the Stork Communications building on the UCSB campus. Our transmitter is located on Broadcast Peak in the Santa Ynez Mountains at an elevation of 1,228 meters above sea level, or 4,028 feet. Please address correspondence to General Manager, KCSB-FM, P.O. Box 10401, University of California, Santa Barbara, California 93107. This is KCSB-FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara.